Hey, this is Eli Danze, and you're listening to Catholic versus Catholic.
Tell the listeners, if you would please, a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, David. So my name is Eli. Like I said, I'm from Texas. I'm from Austin, Texas. Now I live here in San Antonio, Texas. And I moved here about 12 years ago with my wife, Kate. We met in college at University of Dallas. It's a Catholic liberal arts college. And now I'm a married man. I have 6 kids on earth, 3 in heaven. Praise be to God. 3 by miscarriage. So anyway, I'm a full-time employee at Travelers Insurance. I'm an underwriter, commercial insurance underwriter. And on a side hustle, I have my own podcast actually called Boni Bella Podcast, where I interview guests as well. And our basis is be kind, do good, you are beautiful. So it's stories of people that are doing those things in the world with their time, talent, treasure, and their business nonprofits, and their families, and their lives, and their faith life. And it's very exciting for me on the side. So that's kind of a little bit about myself. I am Catholic, Roman Catholic, and have been my whole life, and just broken and blessed by God.
Can you just talk a little bit about your childhood, some of the earliest experiences that you had that touched on religion? What were some of the earliest memories that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. I think one of the earliest memories that I have was my first confession and first communion. Just the reverence and the importance by my parents to receive my first confession and first communion. I can just remember being by myself up near the altar and a huge church, and I was the only one, and just receiving that Eucharist was incredibly important, and just a blessing and a gift, and I just understood the importance of receiving Him in the form of the Eucharist. So I think that'd probably be the earliest, and then outside of that, I became a altar server after that. So I guess I was about 8 years old, and ever since then, God has been a huge part of my life, and the Catholic faith is incredibly important to me. And I've gone ups and downs in my faith life and in my life, but God has always been there. So
now, typically during adolescence or early adulthood, there's a bit of rebellion, some maybe even a complete loss of faith. I'm not sure how dark your darkest years were, but can you just talk a little bit about your dark years?
I would say that high school up until, say, freshman year of college was probably the darkest times, and definitely started to rebel in high school, and became class president, I think, freshman, sophomore year. And so I just felt really excited to be popular and to want to be a partier type guy. And so, yeah, I think I threw a few parties, I lied to my parents. I mean, just things you really obviously shouldn't do, and turned away from them and away from God subsequently, just trying to be somebody I wasn't. But during that time, I also was a retreat leader, and prayer and Mass, of course, were still part of my life. But after high school, first year of college, with leaving the house, it's easy to stray away, and Mass and God were not a big part of my life then. I'd say that I just went to confession and Mass because I had to, but not because it was important to me. And so, the friends you meet the first year of college, unfortunately, are usually the ones you don't end up with, and they were bad influences, definitely not leading others to Christ. So I think we all go through that period somewhat in our lives. And then luckily I found my girlfriend at the time, wife now, end of freshman year, and the rest is history. We've really grown up together in our faith life. So
I am an adult convert to Catholicism. I was 39 when I converted from atheism. So I feel like the prodigal son. I don't know how cradle Catholics feel. I don't know if they feel like they're the good son. Does that evoke envy in them when they're faced with a convert such as myself because of the abundance of graces that are bestowed on me? Can you just talk a little bit about your ongoing conversion as an adult? How does that happen for the cradle Catholic?
I think everyone in their own lives becomes the prodigal son or the good son at different times in their life. And even when you weren't Catholic, you were still a son of God, a good man, born by God and made in His image and likeness. So you're going to have good days and bad days, good years and bad years. I would say that I did feel a little bit entitled, took it for granted, didn't have enough gratitude for Jesus and for my faith. Even though that was instilled in me early on, I was still, and maybe this is part of my parents too. Just, prayer wasn't necessarily an everyday necessary. We really need it to feed us. It was more of something we do on Sundays. You go to confession because you need to. So from a conversion story standpoint, I would say as soon as I had my first kid, my daughter, she was in the hospital for 3 months. And I really started to realize the power and the beauty and the mercy of God, because she was born 12 weeks early. And like I said, spent 3 months in the hospital, received the last rites and the anointing of the sick and all those things, and baptism right after birth. And so, once you go to that bottom of the barrel as far as your faith, you're really struck into realizing that's the only thing you have to hold on to. I also lost my job at that time, and my wife was quitting her teaching because she wanted to raise Emily full-time. So neither of us had jobs. So we really had to pull ourselves up and ask God to help us along the way, obviously. And I would say that was probably the bottom of the barrel for me from a family, marriage, life, faith standpoint. And we had to go from there. It was not easy. I was actually in school, too, at the time. I was getting my MBA. So not only did I not have a job, I was getting my MBA, and my wife was at home with our daughter at all times if she wasn't in the hospital. So it was very difficult. But from there, it's been amazing, an amazing journey. And like I said, I'm still on it. And it's, you have your good days and bad days, and that's what confession and Eucharist and all the sacraments are for us.
How old are you now, if you don't mind my asking?
I'm 34.
It seems that you've already undergone quite a bit of suffering with the loss of 3 children through miscarriage and various other trials I'm sure that you and your family have endured. Can you just talk from your perspective about suffering? What is the value of suffering as a Catholic?
I think everybody suffers in certain ways. I think it's perspective. Not everybody's addicted to drugs or alcohol or has lost a loved one or has had some horrible thing happen in their life to experience suffering. I think suffering happens every single day. We have our own insecurities, we have our own struggles, we have our own doubts, despairs, fears, issues that we're dealing with from when we're young. I think we all have those things, but we turn to the cross, we turn to Christ, and that's the way we get through it. I mean, I pray for those, and I'm sorrowful and empathetic to those that don't have a faith life, don't have God, because I really don't know how they do it. And so I would say that the way I take suffering is I have to work to realize that I'm nothing. We were born from nothing, and we're going to die and go to dust. And when I work, it makes me feel good personally, just selfishly, but it also gets out my suffering. Like when I do the dishes at home with my wife, or when I'm helping the kids change a diaper or do the laundry at home, or other things that aren't necessarily glorified in this culture, but they're glorified to God just because you do them every single day. Like St. Teresa of Lisieux says, you can do great things with small acts or small things with great love. And at work too, when I'm working with people that don't like me, or I don't like them necessarily, or we don't get along, just throwing that up to God and saying, you put it in your hands, Lord, let me carry my cross. And so, I love work. I work from 8 sometimes to midnight at night with my side project, and also my 8 to 5. So that's the way that I deal with my sufferings and my crosses is I give it up to the Lord, and I just say, Lord, let me do your work, and with my hands and my feet and my eyes and my ears and all the gifts that you've given me. And I've said that on my podcast many times, that I love work because it really gets us outside of ourselves and realize that we have so much to offer to others. And no matter what you're going through, no matter what you have in your life, no matter what pain you've gone through, suffering, I mean, there's lots of things we're all dealing with, and you just have to step outside of yourself and give to others and share the love of the Lord.
This next question is rather personal for me. I just got back from Colorado visiting my sister Linda, and I had a wonderful time. I met Father Peter of the Lanky Guys podcast. My listeners might have heard about that. If you haven't, check it out. It's a really good Catholic podcast that talks about the connections among the Sunday Mass readings. But the point of my story is that I'm not a good flyer. I have an irrational fear that big heavy plane is just going to drop to the earth. But do those sorts of irrational fears that grip my intestines on the plane, do they bode ill for my eternal salvation? Am I in danger of eternal damnation because I'm not in friendship with God? That's the thought that crossed my mind.
I think if you have fear of flying, maybe you need to fly more. I don't know. But flying is actually the most safe way of transportation. Flying is like so much safer than driving. It's crazy. I mean, I would say that you got to put it in God's hands. Like, there really shouldn't be any fear of death if you have faith. I've talked about this in my podcast too. It's if you have faith in God, if you really diligently follow Him as a Catholic. I mean, there's this thing out there called Catholic guilt. You can look it up, but everybody has, sins on your shoulders, and you're carrying it every single day. And you just have to go to confession, give it over to the Lord, have the sacraments, and then just have faith in God that He'll make everything right. I mean, pray, hope, and don't worry, right? St. Padre Pio. If you don't know St. Padre Pio, go look him up. But I think the other thing is to try new things, to step outside of out of your comfort zone. That's what I'm doing now. I've done since February, stepping out of my comfort zone and realizing, man, that I have so much to offer the world, and that is to sacrifice, to speak the truth, and to know that I'm called to greatness, and that I'm calling others to greatness and challenging others. So I think fear is in all of us because of our sin from our innate nature as sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. But through our baptism, through grace, through the sacraments, through God's mercy and forgiveness, there is nothing to fear. I mean, truly, you don't fear hell or heaven because you know God, you loving God, and you're trying to serve God as much as possible. And that's the meaning of life. I mean, like I said, I've talked about it many times, to know, love, and serve God is what we're called to. Yeah, that's the basis of the catechism of the faith, is to know, love, and serve God in the simplest of terms. And I've had a fear of public speaking. I've had a fear of video. I've had a fear of audio. Just hearing yourself talk, hearing yourself on the video, hearing your voice in public speaking can be very nerve-wracking and very chilling. I mean, for me, it's like, man, my voice is scratchy. I sound like a kid. I look like a kid. I look like, I'm angry a lot of times on video. I mean, if you go watch my videos on YouTube or Instagram, I look like I'm just not happy. But really, I am. I'm just being myself. And I just have to get over that fear of someone else not liking me or not caring for what I'm saying or thinking that I'm doing this selfishly or that I'm doing it for my own wants and needs. But truly, it's just to give to people and just motivate people to be better people.
And what about the saints? Who are some of your favorite saints?
I would say, number one, I mean, Our Lady, nobody calls her necessarily Saint Mary, but Our Lady of Guadalupe. I think that for the Americas, for this country, for really anybody, but especially people who are lost, who don't have a way, and who have taken the left fork when they should have taken right, it's Mary that's going to bring you back to the fold, bring you back to the flock of Christ. So I would say Our Lady, number one. But number two, I would say St. Maximilian Kolbe. When I visited Europe with my wife, we were studying in Rome, sophomore year of college. We went to Auschwitz, Poland, and it was really moving to be there and see St. Maximilian's cell where he died, and just giving his life for that father, that husband, and then bringing people to the faith when he was in this prison is just incredible. And then to learn about his life afterwards. And so I named my second-born son after St. Maximilian Kolbe, just with his example, and he's close to Mary as well. The other one would, St. Anthony of Padua, finder of lost things, but I just visited his basilica in Padua, Italy with my family, my wife, and in-laws, and that was incredible just to be able to touch his tomb. That's my confirmation St. Anthony, and again, just someone that's followed God's path, and through troubles and hard times, he was an incredible saint, just a real laid down his life too for Christ in a lot of ways. And so I named my fourth son after him, Benedict Anthony. So I've been incredibly blessed to name four sons after four or eight amazing saints. And then the last one, I would say St. Padre Pio. just with the amazing miracles that he's performed, and just to hear the stories. I mean, they just really bring you back to realize that Christ is living every single day in this world, and if we say yes to him, then he will do amazing things with us and for us. So Padre Pio is recent too. You know, he just died, I guess, not too long ago, 1950s or 1960s, and I really wanted to visit where he died, but wasn't able to, in Petrolina, I think it's what it's called, in Italy. But he's a great confessor, and if you don't know Padre Pio, definitely look up his stories, and just an amazing servant of God. But those are kind of my top three, I'd say.
Because I'm in Montreal, I like to ask my guests, have you heard of Saint Andre Bessette?
No, I've never heard of him.
Okay, well, he was a local hero. He was born in the 19th century, but he was just a humble doorman, and he had a vision, and he had a great devotion to St. Joseph. So he had a vision to build a church, a great church for St. Joseph, and he did a lot of miracles. So if you don't know him, check him out, Andre Bessette.
Sure.
Saint Brother Andre, as he's commonly known. Very famous, did a lot of healings, a lot of miracles with St. Joseph's oil that used to burn in the oratory, and it still burns in the oratory, and you can still buy this oil. I buy it, I use it every day as part of my prayer life in my little shrine.
Wow.
But we're so lucky in the Catholic Church with the saints. There's so many great saints, so inspirational, the way they lived, the way they died, and the way that they loved God and Jesus Christ and the other saints. Their devotion and their love, it really is touching, really is inspirational. I myself came to God through philosophy, so the whole Western philosophy tradition contains a lot of heavy hitters. St. Augustine, St. Anselm, they're two of my favorites, and of course St. Thomas Aquinas. What role has philosophy, natural theology, and the intellectual side of the saints played in your own ongoing conversion? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Good question. I definitely need to dig into it more. Right now I'm reading the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I'm starting from paragraph 1, actually, and going through the whole thing to help me with my podcast. But, yeah, I did study St. Augustine in college. I did take different philosophy courses. But I would say intellectually, just through the Mass and reading the Gospel, and then the breviary. iBreviary is an app on my phone that I read with my friend once a week, and I need to do it more often. But just the Psalms and some of the different prayers in there as well. But I wouldn't say that I have a saint necessarily that I'm close to intellectually. And it's something that I've been called to recently, to get back into the Catechism and know it intimately in order to really preach as God calls us to be, as a priest, prophet, and king. But, you know, I would say that it's a journey I'm on, and I have had Catholic education my whole life. And I can remember when I was in 8th grade and going to confirmation, being super interested and always asking questions, where a lot of the other kids were sitting there taking in the information. I was trying to ask questions. And so I've always been kind of an inquisitive person and wanting to learn more. So I would say that that's the journey I'm on right now, is questioning and asking God kind of what he's asking for me, or asking me to do in this world of social media with my own thoughts, my own brain. And, you know, I think in a lot of ways, recent or new philosophers in this world are people like Will Smith in the culture today. And I hope to kind of be that for people to come to the Catholic faith, to be attractive to them, to really speak the truth, and to be attractive to people that have fallen away from the faith or that are faithful Catholics that like to learn more. And so obviously I need to read a lot more up into intellectual Catholics like St. Anselm and St. Augustine. So that's something I can't really speak to too much.
Now, what about history? What about the history of the Church, the history of the papacy, the history of the councils? Are you interested in history? Just talk a little bit about the history and the Church.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the stories of St. Peter, and then the more recent popes I'm more intimately know. I mean, St. John Paul the Great was very close to me. I probably saw him 5 or 6 times over my life with my mom when we went to Jubilee one year, 2000, and then with my brother in 1998 Pentecost. I was there with the Regnum Christi movement, and then I went with my parents too, like 1993 or 94 as a family vacation. And so just with his work with the youth and being not afraid and all of his beautiful writings. I mean, Syntismus Annus, Liberal Exertions, some of those papal encyclicals are really important. And then, of course, the Catechism came from John Paul II. And someone, if you want to look up fear, that's John Paul II. I mean, when he stood up against communism in the late 80s, in the Cold War era, he's really an amazing saint for that. And then the other saint is Pope Paul VI, who wrote Humana Vitae. That's a huge, important document for the culture of life today versus the culture of death, which I think is where a lot of the social ills and the evils that plague us today are from. He actually predicted it back in his Humana Vitae encyclical.
So I guess this brings us to the topic of sexuality, abortion, contraception, things like that. Today, the world is very confused about human nature, the nature of sexuality, the role of the family, what is intimacy, what is marriage, what is love. Can you talk a little bit about sex, marriage, intimacy, and these sorts of things?
Oh, wow. An entire podcast could be dedicated to that. I had Abby Johnson on. She's, of course, a former director of Planned Parenthood who came on my show. She's an author now and has her own ministry, and then there went on. But funny you would ask that. My parents have been involved in the pro-life ministry from the 80s to today. I prayed on the sidewalk since I was 8 until today. And I actually helped lead a boycott back in 2014 and 15 of Planned Parenthood being renovated here in San Antonio, Texas. My father led a boycott in 2003 against Planned Parenthood in Austin, Texas, and that actually helped that center from being constructed for a year. They helped shut down that center for 1 year, made it more expensive. So I have quite a background on that. I mean, it's amazing to me that science says it's a baby from the moment of conception, because if someone kills the mother that's pregnant, that's a double homicide, and that person's going to get tried as a double murder, a double homicide. So how can we say that it's okay for the mother and her own selfishness, her own ideas, her own lifestyle, whatever she's going through is not nearly what the baby's about to experience when its legs and arms get ripped from its body and it gets sucked out of the mother, or chemical pills taken and it gets basically flushed down the toilet. That's basically what we're saying, is that human life is a piece of garbage, and it's unbelievable to me that we've killed 60 million babies in this country alone since Roe v. Wade. Sue Thayer, I believe it was, didn't even realize what was happening, and she didn't realize what abortion was when that law came to pass.
She was the Roe in Roe v. Wade?
Yeah, she's Roe, and she actually, of course, now was a pro-life advocate. So the very person that passed that law is actually a huge pro-life advocate. It's unbelievable to me how we can sit there and accept things like selling of baby body parts by Planned Parenthood and all these other companies. I don't know if you saw that. David Deidelin has exposed them through his Center for Medical Progress in the last few years, and yet we try him in the court of law for all of his crimes that he's doing, when in reality it's Planned Parenthood that kills thousands of babies every single day. So this is the world that we live in. This is the culture of death that we've allowed as Christians, as Catholics. It's going to be hard for people to hear that and hear it come out of my mouth, but it's so true, because we have not done enough. Christians and Catholics to know the truth, to know that God is made, every human being is made in the image and likeness of God, have not done enough. And that's part of my goal, is to make people realize and wake them up. And it's with my words, it's with my love, it's with my own mind, my own mouth, that I'm going to do that. And I'm not going to stop until they, put me in jail or something else. I'm a father and husband, but I'm also called to be a priest, prophet, and king. That's what we're called to in our baptism, is to sacrifice, to speak the truth, and we're called to greatness. So that's a big passion of my heart. I've always been unabashedly pro-life, and I'll continue to do it. I just have to continue to broaden my scope of things that I talk about in my podcast, because I don't want it to be all about pro-life, but it certainly is a huge calling in my life too. So.
No, but it really is ridiculous when Delayden came out with these videos. There were always two versions available online, the edited version that sort of got to the point quickly, and then the full-length uncut video, which showed everything. So I always found it outrageous when people would accuse, even mainstream newspapers were accusing David Deladen of having aggressively edited these videos, chopped them up beyond recognition, and so on and so forth, when there was zero outrage for chopping up human beings, but there is a huge outrage for the fact that allegedly these videos were chopped up, and that was just inhumane and despicable and beyond the pale. But Satan really is the prince of this world. He's been nailed to the cross of Christ, but he's still flailing. He's still wearing his tarnished crown. He is the prince of this world, and you see it in the power and authority, even up into the highest echelons of the church at times, reaching up into all places of power. And there is no place of power quite like the Catholic Church, so we should expect Satan to be reaching his slimy tentacles up into the highest reaches of the church, or at least trying to. And so what is it about power and this worldliness where black is white, white is black, up is down, down is up, evil is good, and good is evil? It just astonishes me, the blindness, the willing blindness of people today. I mean, it's so easy to see Satan at work in power structures of this world. I mean, I sometimes do a bit of volunteer work with the church. So one day I was called to a meeting in an office building downtown in Montreal, and immediately when I got there, I recognized it as the same building with the Morgentaler abortion clinic. It's one of the first abortion clinics in Canada and one of the most controversial. It was back in the late 60s that Dr. Morgentaler first opened his abortion clinic in Montreal, and he really pushed for abortion. He was the first one actually to use vacuum aspiration to kill the humans in the womb. Quite a controversial figure. So when I went up to my meeting, I mentioned the Morgentaler clinic to two of the priests that I was talking to, and they advised me to change the subject because they had signed a document forbidding anyone in their Catholic offices to even mention the Morgentaler name or the Morgentaler clinic or anything about abortion whatsoever. They'd signed a paper that was part of the condition of renting an office space in this building, this high-rise building in downtown Montreal. And they, as a Catholic organization, had to sign a document saying that they would not talk even in a non-controversial way, in any way, about this abortion clinic. So there is a real battle taking place here on earth. Can you just talk a little bit about the spiritual battle and the power of Satan in governing this fallen world?
Well, I would say that, unfortunately, with a lot of things that have happened in the last 100 years in this country, in this world, with sexual revolution, the progressiveness of contraceptives, of abortion, of same-sex attraction, of divorce, of pornography, of masturbation, of all those ills that we face every single day, and the pushing of all that by the media, it's an underlying Satanist culture that sits within all of us. I mean, Satan is very much real. The evil spirits are very much real. So I think that's the base answer, unfortunately, but I say the end answer is that God wins. I mean, whatever we're going through, whatever this culture, this world is going through right now, God will win in the end. I mean, Jesus comes back eventually and does take his flock with him to heaven. So unfortunately, I think with the age of technology, of digital, and of all the different VR, I mean, I shudder at the thought of what's going to be like in 50 years with things like sex robots and virtual reality, because that's already happening in places like Europe and Asia. But, I would say it all stems from the family. Like I said before, with Humana Vitae, it all comes from the family, and that's respect for marriage, respect for your wife and your spouse and your husband, respect for children, having children. I mean, I got to tell you, man, it probably saved me to get married at 22 and to have a child at 23, and now I have 6 children at 34, because I wouldn't be the man I am today. I wouldn't be called by God to lay down my life unless I had married children. I mean, if I was in my 20s and not married, I don't know where I'd be. I shudder at the thought of where I'd be if I wasn't married with children, because they keep me grounded, they make me a better person, and that helps build up the kingdom. It's when we're selfish, when we give in to our desires, when we give in to the things of the world, when we are of the world, we're not in the world. We're called to be in the world, but not of the world. We're not called to be part of the world as far as just immersing ourselves in that. We're called to immerse ourselves in Christ and God. And unfortunately, just too many, like you said, powers and authority have given over to the devil and given over to evil. It's just unfortunately so clear. And you look at the church, like I said before, Catholics and the Catholic Church are unfortunately in the culture of death to blame a little bit because of what we have done. Look at this Cardinal Merrick situation that's come out, all the other scandals that come out since Boston and early 2000s. And elections, don't get me started on elections. Catholics electing liberals and Democrats and those that believe in killing children is okay. That's kind of where a lot of this starts. And a lot of it actually started 100 years ago, but most recently in the last 20 or 30 years in America. So that's a long and short answer, and I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for.
I'd like to change gears a little bit now and just talk to us, if you would, a little bit about your perspective on unity, Christian unity. The Orthodox, the Protestants, and the Catholics, are we all going to get together? How's that going to happen? What can we do about it? Just talk a little bit about unity, please.
Interesting question. I've never been asked that before. I would say that Jesus started the church 2,000 years ago, and it was called the Catholic Church. And he gave Peter the keys to the kingdom and said, "Upon this rock I build my church." That is the Christian church. And I think having people realize the history of Jesus Christ, the history of the church, is incredibly important. Bishop Robert Barron is a great historian that I've watched a few of his videos and his shows recently. But if you don't know him, go look him up, Bishop Robert Barron. But he does a really good job taking everyone through the history of the church. And that's really where it started. It was, 1,500 years later that Protestant church came about. So I think having people realize the beginning of the church, and the other thing is love, mercy, forgiveness is a big part of it. So many people are in pain and suffering now because they don't know the love of God. They don't know Christ. No one's introduced to them. If they have, they've fallen away and fallen into the world, like I said. So I would say a big part of Christian unity is just loving each other and knowing that Christ loves all of us. We are called to convert others to the Catholic faith, but it starts with love, it starts with service, it starts with humility, it starts with patience, all these other things. And, too often I think we try and push too much or go the other way. We're not Catholic enough. The truth is the truth is the truth, and when it's masked with lies and deception and deceit, then that actually distracts people from the faith. And what I mean by that is people like Father James Martin are very dangerous to the Catholic faith. Even though he's a priest and he's on Facebook, he's very dangerous to the Catholic faith because he's spreading a lot of lies and deceit and the things that are not true about the Catholic faith, about the Catholic Church. And the same thing with Cardinal Merrick and a lot of the other high-powered, high-authority priests and unfortunately bishops and cardinals is they're not living as a Catholic priest should live, or not serving and giving over their lives as a priest, prophet, and king. So I would say that Christian unity starts with Catholic Church being truly, truly Catholic. And I think when we are truly, authentically Catholic, we'll bring more Christians to the church.
I know you're very busy, so I will let you go. Speaking of being busy, I know that you're working full-time. You're a husband, you're a father, you got your family to look after, and you've got your podcast, right? So it's kind of exciting having a fellow Catholic podcaster on here. I've listened to a couple of your podcasts. I enjoyed it, and I hope to find time to listen to some more, so keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. I will. Yeah, and I'd like to have you on my podcast as well. I'd like to interview you and hear about your conversion story. I'm super excited to learn about it. I have a similar format where I just ask you for your background, and then I ask you what you do in your day-to-day life and how do you help people. And then I like to ask to go a little bit deeper. Tell me what your goals, dreams are, what you want to achieve in your life, and how you can help people more in the future. And then I kind of end with tell me how we can help you, and what can we pray for you for, and then I ask everyone to give a challenge or an action item for people to do out in the world. So that's kind of the format. It's pretty simple.
Keep it simple. Yeah, that's the best. Speaking of your podcast, just if you want to talk a little bit about some of your favorite past episodes, and then talk a little bit about what you're excited about for the future of your Catholic podcast, please.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I am super excited about the Boni Bella podcast. I just started it in March of this year, so it's been 5 months. I've had 13 guests. I've had 32 podcasts. Every single day is a blessing. Every single guest is a blessing, and every podcast is a blessing because I have words to speak. I have a phone to use, and I have this ability to distribute it on social media to get the word out about God, Christ, the Holy Spirit, and the Mother Mary. And I do that in a way that speaks to the world around us, the culture and the society that we live in. And I say that because I've had podcasts where I talk about general ideas called kindness, goodness, and beauty. Be kind, do good. You are beautiful. That is the calling. That is the mission. But it's stories of people that are doing those things every single day, and it's beautiful to hear stories of mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, business owners, and nonprofit directors who are giving Christ and God to other people. And it's just by them living out their faith and just by being Christian, by being Catholic. It's very simple. But it's also very beautiful because in this culture, in this world right now, the ideas of goodness, kindness, and beauty, I think, are defined by society and culture in a lot of different ways, whereas I'm trying to define it in a God-centered, Christ-centered way. I would say that some of my favorite podcasts would have to be Steve Pokorny's when he discusses his book, Redeemed Vision, Setting the Blind Free from the Pornified Culture, who I know you've had on as a guest. Steve is just a faithful man, husband, father of God, but he's also a reformed, converted Catholic back to the faith after compulsion pornography. So his just witness and honesty and humility to the faith is unbelievable. And another one is a young man by the name of Ryan Harkins, who started a marriage ministry called 3 to Thrive. That was the second guest I've had on the podcast, and that ministry is taking off in Dallas, Texas. Him and his wife are approved, actually, by the Bishop of Dallas to have that marriage ministry, and they go to different churches every single month, different Catholic churches in Dallas, and they give the marriage ministry to Dallas parishioners, and they bring in Catholic priests and Catholic speakers to speak every single month on different topics, and that's really promoting and spreading the good news of marriage. He also happens to be the director of Birth Choice of Dallas, which is a crisis pregnancy center in Dallas, and that was an amazing podcast. I think that was podcast 29. You can go look it up. But he discusses some stories about men who have answered God's call to be the husband, be the father of the baby, be the husband to the wife, be the boyfriend to the girlfriend, to be the man that God called them to be, to accept and love and welcome babies into the lives of their significant others, of their women in their life. And it's really beautiful to hear how he challenges men and how they step up to the plate and become better men on that podcast. And I'm going to go deeper into men in the future. I'm going to talk more about men who are addicted to alcohol, number one, but I'd like to find one that's addicted to drugs. And then I'm going to find in Reformation, obviously, through that process, and now giving them their lives over to God. Also, I will bring on other men who are truly daily heroes for us in the armed services, in fire and police, hopefully. I've asked several to come on, and I'm still waiting on their responses. So I've got a lot of exciting things coming up. Obviously, another one that in the past, and I'll do more of them, is one with Abby Johnson, who started in Then There Were None ministry to bring abortion workers out of the abortion industry, and has taken actually like 350 workers out of the abortion industry, even like 8 doctors from doing abortions now to other walks of life, which is amazing. And I'll bring on another one here next week. Will be another crisis pregnancy center that actually has a mobile van that does sonograms for pregnant women on the street in the van out in San Antonio, Texas. That's going to be an amazing story, and also a video blog for that one. So a lot of exciting things coming up. I'm going to go deeper into men, deeper into beauty, deeper into what that means to be beautiful, and kind of defining that word beautiful like Steve does as well. and making people realize that we can be more vulnerable and realize that there's a lot of beauty that comes from being vulnerable and letting go of our anxieties and letting go of our fears and doubts. So that's kind of the gist of the podcast. I also put in 3 to 4 minute thoughts about the Catholic Church, about faith, about life, about business, about personal life, and just hopefully motivational to you, but it's my own little thoughts. And so that's kind of my podcast in a nutshell, Boni Bella Podcast. So Instagram, I'm at Boni and Bella, all spelled out. Facebook, Boni and Bella spelled out. Twitter as well as Boni and Bella spelled out. BoniBella.com is my blog. And then I'm also on YouTube, and I'm also on LinkedIn, actually, Boni and Bella, Boni plus sign Bella. And so I'm trying to be everywhere that I can to spread the good news. Be kind, do good. You are beautiful.
I do really appreciate the work you're doing. I want to thank you. And I just want to mention as a little side note that when you talked about Abby Johnson and her organization, and then there were none, just the name alone, when you mentioned that name, it really gave me chills and brought a tear to my eye because it is so powerful. Just the idea of the work that she's doing, I haven't checked it out yet, but I certainly will. And I hope my listeners will too. It really is powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you really got to go look it up. She is amazing. I mean, it's just amazing to hear the stories of people that literally walk off the abortuaries and go into her arms and just say, help me. And they give them jobs. I mean, they help them with their rent. I mean, it's amazing what they do. These women that, and men too, that are sucked into the evil of abortion industry, and then she, walks them out and gives them a new life, really. And isn't that beautiful? How you go from killing life to welcoming life and loving life. It's just sickening to think what abortion does and the evil and the devil behind it. But there's so much goodness that comes from people that say, no, that's not going to work. I'm going to do something else, and I'm going to help people. So that's part of my mission, and I'm excited to talk about it with you because it's amazing what God can do.
It really is. And we have nothing to fear. Evil has no substance. Evil is falling away from the good. And we are, God willing, oriented toward the good, so we have nothing to fear. But at the end of my interviews, I always give my guests a chance to talk directly to the audience. Just give a little positive message of hope, something for everyone, because we don't know who's listening, and not everyone, not all my listeners are Catholic. But what could you say, just as a general message of hope, to anyone that might be out there listening now?
I would say that we're all called to live with gratitude, and no matter what, you are alive. You are born, you are someone's son or daughter, you are someone's wife or husband, you are someone's friend, you are someone's lover, you're someone's girlfriend, you're someone's boyfriend. I mean, you are someone's grandfather or grandmother, you're someone's grandchild. You are someone. You are loved, and you are called to love. We're called to love and be loved. No matter what religion, faith, denomination, where you are in the world, doesn't matter your skin color, your gender, your hair color, your skin color, or anything. You are alive, you are a human being, and you are loved. And that alone is an amazing, amazing gift. It's an amazing, amazing blessing. And we are called to give that to other people. We are called to look to our left and our right, up and down, to shake hands, to smile, to give a wink, to give a nod, to give a hug, to give love, to give a kiss, to give anything that we can out of love and out of kindness and out of sacrifice and out of goodness in our hearts, out of beauty that we're made. I mean, the very fact that you have an eyeball or a hand or hair on your head is an amazing gift, an amazing blessing. And just to have that gratitude changes your life. I mean, goodness, it's just amazing. If you think about it, the eyeball alone in a human being is the most amazing creation ever. That not even including the brain or the entire human body. I mean, you have so many gifts that you can give to other people, and whatever you're going through right now in your life, no matter what it is, when you start out and step outside the door every single day out of your house, out of your apartment, and you give to other people out of gratitude and kindness and goodness and beauty, man, the world changes for the better for everybody, including yourself.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you've got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is